Welcome back to the Capes and Tights podcast right here on capesandtights.com. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg. This episode is once again brought to you by our friends at Galactic Comics and Collectibles at galacticcomicsandcollectibles.com. This episode, we see the return of John Campopiano and the first-time appearance of Gary Smart. The two of them are filmmakers. Gary Smart and John Campopiano are documentary filmmakers who have written, directed, and produced films such as the series RoboDoc, featuring behind the scenes and historical look at the RoboCop movie, as well as Pennywise, a story of It from Stephen King's It movie from the 1990s, as well as they teamed up and co-directed and produced released a new movie called Art Attack, the Dissection of Terrifier 3, which is a documentary about the Terrifier 3 movie and the franchise as a whole, which is now streaming on ScreamBox. So we discussed making documentaries, making the Terrifier 3 documentary opposed to ones they make themselves, and so much more. This is Gary Smart and John Campopiano on the Capes and Tights podcast. Enjoy, everyone. Welcome to the podcast, gentlemen. How are you two today? Hopefully good.
Yeah, glad to be finally here.
Exactly.
Yeah, doing well, man.
I'm glad. It's always one of those weird things. It's like trying to figure out time zones. It's like we should have learned this years ago. And I'm like, thank God there's Google though, because I can be like, what time is it now in London?
I blame you guys because obviously over here it's quite easy. But when you're dealing with the States, you're a different time zone. You're a different time. Bloody hell, just have the same time zone.
Yeah.
It's You should all follow the UK.
Some people, like in people that I work with, and agents and booking people and PR people, sometimes they just only deal in Eastern time. They're just like, we're going to deal in Eastern time. This is the easiest way to tell the time, whatever. And then there's other people where I get an email. I'm like, cool, that sounds good. And I'm like, oh, wait, that's the Central time. What's 1 hour? I'm trying to do the math in my head. And I'm like,
I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's a little and I guess for most of the part in the US, I usually talk to people on the East Coast or the West Coast, and so it's either Pacific time or Eastern time. That's usually how it goes. But we're here.
At one point, I was working on a project with someone in Australia, and we had somebody on the East Coast. I was on the East Coast, West Coast, Australia time. We'd find times to Zoom, and it would be like 1 a.m. his time because everybody else, it's a dance.
Yes, that's the way it works. Hey, we could do this all virtually now. This is awesome. So we don't have to be in the same room, which is cool in the first place. So, but yeah, well, welcome. We're here to talk about the Art Attack, the Dissection of Terrifier 3 documentary and more stuff. But to get started, I mean, from both of you, and I'm pretty sure we probably talked about this in the past, John, but I'd love to hear from Gary and both of you at this point too, is like, I just want to know what draws you to tell stories behind the stories. Just a quick synopsis on how you got into this industry and what made you want to do what you do. It don't have to be too long, but just something. Just tell us a little bit about your history on it. And we'll start with Gary. Why don't you go, Gary?
I waffle, so just cut around anything I say. It's a long story for me, but I'll make it short. So I've obviously always loved film, always loved horror films, but particularly loved special effects. Even as a little kid, I'd be like trying to work out like makeup effects, getting Fangoria magazine, any news clippings I could find. Obviously back then, a lot more difficult than it is now to actually find anything behind the scenes and the men behind the mask and whatnot. So when DVDs came out and you suddenly started getting with documentaries and behind the theme featurettes, even though they're only like 10 minutes of old 80pks, I mean, I bought the DVD just for the behind the scenes of the commentaries, particularly. And I know that I've got friends who won't listen to commentaries, but I love listening to commentaries, or I used to. So it was really kind of like, kind of a passion for me straight away, like how films are made, how effects are made. And I kind of got into it in a very strange way. I think I first got into it because I became friends with Don Calfa from Return of the Living Dead, and he had loads of stories on obviously that franchise, or the first film particularly. So I decided to write a book with a chap called Christian Sellers called The Complete History of Return of the Living Dead. That did really well for the publishers, not for me, but it did really well for the publishers. And then I was approached then by Tommy Hudson and Mikey Perez to write the documentary with Christian, More Brains, A Return to the Living Dead. And that was quite a nice process, that was. It was quite easy for us, really. One, we knew the concept, but also the fact that they went and interviewed people, they transcribed it, and we just built the script or the edit or the story or narrative via those transcribes. So I kind of started thinking, all you have to do really is put a camera in front of somebody, interview them, transcribe, and you got a doc. Naively thinking that was the way. And then we did a few screenings in Birmingham, where I live. Well, I used to live in the UK, and we did a screening of Return of the Living Dead, and we had Don over, and we did a screening of Hellraiser 1 and 2, and we had Ken Cranham, Jeff Porter, Simon Bamford, and Nicholas Vince come over for that. And I kind of realized that nobody had done a documentary about Hellraiser before. You had Nightmare on Elm Street, you had Friday the 13th. You know, John, I think about the same time, was working on the Pet Sematary doc. But nobody ever touched on Hellraiser, which was really weird considering how iconic Pinhead was. You know, the poster boy for that franchise. And in fact, it was a UK production, really. It was American money, but it was filmed in the UK, 1 and 2 particularly. So that meant a lot of the cast and crew were here. So we took inspiration from Never Sleep Again and decided to make a very in-depth documentary on Hellraiser 1 and 2. And then we interviewed, like, literally, you know, the world and his wife who were involved in that film, and ended up with a 9-hour documentary, which was like very, very long and was very, you know, very much for a learning curve. For some reason, the fans seem to love the original 9-hour cut. It makes my eyes bleed because we see the mistakes that you know, and we were trying to be big, and so later on we reduced it to a 3-hour cut, I think it was, for Arrow. Oh, wow. That's basically how it happened for us. Leviathan was the first thing that rolled onto, I'm sure we'll talk about it in a bit, like things like Brewster, this Fright Night story. And then I got involved with John Ben. I kind of knew John online, chatting back and forwards, and we came obviously with Pennywise together. So it's always been a passion really about telling stories. And I think very much like John, you know, I think it's really important that obviously the main cast and crew are there, but actually there's people behind the scenes, the clapper loader, you know, the catering person, you know, the gaffer, who are there every single day, and they never tell their stories, ever tell their stories. And it's like, well, you know, someone like Doug Bradley was on the set of Hellraiser for like 9 days. It's a 3-month production. So all that stuff went on. You weren't asking loads of questions, and most of actors' stories come from Q&As and panels they've heard from somebody else. So I think like John, we like to find people who maybe never get a chance to tell their story. People who are actually fans as well as we are, and that's obviously how that's kind of developed our kind of like narrative, like getting as much out of people as we can, and not always focusing on the main faces, trying to get obviously those people because it's important, but also getting the people who actually were the gold base. I mean, we used to call it the gold base, getting the gold of the stories, you know, because that's the people who are there every single day. That's a very short version of a very long story.
I mean, it makes sense. It's an awesome journey to get where we are and telling these stories. But like, John, yours is obviously different, a little story on this. But like, how'd you get to where you are now?
It's a little different, but I think it comes from the same place of like being a fan and growing up with these movies and wanting to learn more and see more. I mean, I kind of come at it from the archive side, so I've always been like just super excited about finding, you know, archive and materials that nobody's seen before. So I kind of have like the archivist perspective on it. And the filming location perspective, because, you know, growing up in New England, there's a lot of movies that have been filmed here. And so as a kid, I would, you know, go to New York City and go see where they filmed Rosemary's Baby or Taxi Driver, or go to the Vineyard and see where they shot Jaws, you know. So it started for me with Pet Sematary and going up to Maine to find locations and meeting locals, not ever planning to make a film. I mean, I had never made a documentary before. I didn't go to film school or anything like that. So, but as I met people and we found photos that no one had ever seen before, it like got me excited, and I wanted to share that with people in some way. And so we kind of stumbled our way through that and made a documentary. And then by then I was sort of bit and wanted to keep doing it. And then that's when I met Gary and everybody at Dead Mouse to do the Pennywise project.
And that obviously that was your first project together on this, like actually full working together on this.
Yeah, it was really weird because we've been talking for ages about doing a documentary on Pennywise because obviously we just love Tim Curry. We were kind of told after the stroke in 2012 it was going to be very hard to get in. And then I think John posted a thing on Facebook. It was him with a red balloon or something like that, or a teaser or something. We were going to do the same thing about the same time. And it was like, shit. Yeah. So then, because I'd already been talking to John, I think either John messaged me, he might saw what we were doing. We kind of got together, and it's kind of melted quite well together in our relationship, because we both wanted to celebrate that particular film because we both loved it as a kid, but also we wanted to celebrate Tim's work as well. And, you know, Tim had never spoke about that film at that time. He was always about, you know, Rocky Horror Picture Show and, you know, and then it went very quiet, obviously, after the stroke. You know, he kind of went out the public eye. So it kind of, you know, it kind of serendipity, really, I think, if anything. It was just a post on Facebook, and I was like, I know that guy, and let's try and talk. And then it kind of evolved from there.
And I think Bart was the connective tissue there too, Gary. Because you would work with him on the Fright Night project, and at that point, we made Pet Sematary. It was released, And my creative partner on that, Justin, didn't want to do another project, not because he wasn't interested, but because his kids were at an age where it was just not feasible for his lifestyle. So there I was, just like one person looking at trying to do something with the miniseries, knowing that like I could never do it on my own. So
Yeah.
I started writing these little articles. I was interviewing cast and writing for Dread Central.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's how I met Bart. And Bart was like, I have all this footage. Gary knew that he had all the footage from working with him on the Fright Night doc. And so we were sort of bound to cross paths, at some point.
And a good thing about someone like Bart, he is an archivist like John. He keeps everything. I mean, ridiculous amount of archive that he has on lots of films. Fright Night, when we worked with him on that, there was so much on Fright Night Part 2 that he had, which no one had ever seen before, really. It was like hundreds and hundreds of photographs. And then, so we knew he was an archivist. And when we worked on RoboCop, exactly the same. So when he told us he had this footage from the making of Stephen King's It was like, hang on, have you? No one's ever seen it. It was hours and hours long, I believe. And, that kind of, we knew we had to do it then. But I think we all said at the very beginning, if we don't get Tim, we won't do it. Because I just think we'd been burnt a little bit on Hellraiser with Clive, because Clive wasn't well at the time. We later kind of had the same situation with Peter Weller, but we actually got him in the end after a very long period to try and get him. And it's like, if you don't get Tim, and it's about Pennywise so central for that film, it was going to be, as much as Tommy was brilliant and as much as Bart was brilliant, I just felt, and then let's try and get him. Obviously, then John worked his magic, and we got Tim. So kind of once Tim was announced, we one of the first, I think, or near the beginning.
The first, yeah.
The first, yeah. So. It kind of spiraled, and I think once you get that key person, most people jump on because they have to jump on. It's like, oh, if Tim's doing it, we've got to do it. So that helps in a project to get the key person first. And we didn't give way around where we wait for the main guy last, because it's been difficult. And obviously that's a RoboCop story. But yeah, so I think it kind of, everything finds place in that project really well through our meeting, through Bart, and then obviously through Tim then.
Yeah. And then the success and the quality of RoboCop and RoboDoc, I should say, and Pennywise story, I'm guessing, led to this Terrifier documentary that you guys work on. And we talked a little bit before, Gary. And we'll touch on it here too. Is it's obviously it was a lot different, right? I mean, you guys created all these other documentaries from ground up, and a lot of work and a lot of like stuff that. But this is something you guys were approached. Is that, I'm guessing, is that what happened? Someone approached you?
Yeah, I mean, I won't take all the glory. I do waffle, but I'll let John jump in a second. Sorry, John. So what happened with Pennywise, particularly, and with RoboCop, they took a long time. Lots of things happened on those projects with COVID and obviously finances. The whole world of documentaries changed when we really need to tell that to people as well, because I think people saw how quick we churned out. Obviously, Pet Sematary for John, but also then Fright Night and Leviathan for us. But in that period of time, things massively changed documentary, because it started getting big, and people started, again, the world and his wife started doing documentaries, and obviously it got more difficult regards to the legal element of and distribution element did. So when we did the Kickstarters and Indiegogos and whatnot, it was a very simple process. We would literally make a documentary, we would release it, do a pre-order, and then pay for the next documentary as with the profits, as well as, so something like, I'm explaining this for a reason, but something like Pennywise, we raised, I think, 33 grand for that, something like that, but it actually cost us about nearly 200 grand it costs us to do, and people don't see that element of it. It's like we've got to find that where it's that money. So the delays in that caused lots of problems for us, and it still has repercussions and problems, though, despite the fact, as you said, they're very successful in terms of the feedback from fans and the awards and whatnot and the quality. But this was different because we were approached. It was quite strange. I had a phone call or an email. I think it was on either just maybe the 23rd of December, the year before last. And it was literally, from ScreamBox saying, we'd love to talk to you about doing this documentary behind the scenes on Terrifier 3. And it's only supposed to be like a mini documentary to go on as a bonus feature. And obviously we did a really good experience with ScreamBox, and obviously got quite close to them. I had a meeting, I think, on the day before, possibly New Year's Eve, about it. And then I spoke to John, because John wanted to be involved. And I knew it was going to be different because the budget was different, and because it was work for hire, our roles more would be the producing side and the writing side, and obviously then the post side, and obviously also the pre-production and production and organising. So we kind of decided there and then we'd have a a crew who were US based, as opposed to us going out like we used to do because of time as well. We'd obviously get a crew to do it. Now, I said when we did Hellraiser and all that kind of stuff, and Pennywise, that's a 6-year process. This was I think we kind of agreed to it, John. I think in the December, and there were our crew on set in the March, I think it was, and then we were edited by the August, I think maybe. The August, yeah. So that's a really quick turnaround. So that was a very strange process for us because it was hands-on in a different way. And I think me and John probably spoke about Art the Clown every day for maybe a year. Well, no, maybe about 9 months every single day. But actually, I think it was more rewarding process because we could see the excitement of things coming in, and you see the stills coming in, you see the interviews coming in. Whereas when you're on the set, I mean, John will probably say the same or probably agrees that it's a long day on the set when you're sitting there in the studio, it's boiling hot and you're having to interview people, and you kind of lose that kind of like, the gold bit when you get bits about people when they're talking, but you're so panicking about the next person coming in. And me and John used to take it in turns to go and like do the meet and greets of people and obviously do the smoozing while the other interview was running late. That was all gone. So we could enjoy it more, I think, in that sense. John, over to you before I start talking more.
No, I agree. I think it was an interesting process to work with such a new IP. I mean, I think Gary and I are used to dealing with older films, that have been shot decades before. So to be coordinating like our second unit team to be on set while they're actually in production filming the thing we're documenting was different. It was a different experience. And getting archive and doing all that was different. I mean, I didn't thankfully have to climb into like anybody's attic and look for old photo albums for this project. So yeah, it was a different experience and sort of more straightforward. We're working, as Gary said, guns for hire, and we're working with Cineverse and ScreamBox that already have like a very established like PR team, a marketing team. We didn't have to worry about that, like making it, and now we got to get it in front of people. Like we could kind of rely on their teams to do that, which made it just a little bit more streamlined. So yeah, hopefully there's more to come. We'll see.
And I think the weird thing as well is that we set out to do like mini documentary. We ended up doing a 100-minute documentary covering all 3 films, covering the legacy again. So we kind of try always deliver more than we actually set out to do. That helps us as a company because obviously it helps people like ScreamBox to go, these guys are good, and we get more for it. And I think I don't know what we're going to do at the moment. We did 9 bonus features as well for this, and that was covering from anything from 5 minutes to 20-minute featurettes about Art the Clown, but more legacy elements, more relationships between a brother and sister. So there's lots more which people haven't seen on the documentary, which has always been edited by our editor and director of other projects, Chris Griffiths. So we ended up getting a lot of stuff, and I think the hardest thing I felt with it was because it was an independent film, particularly the first, like all 3 of them are, but particularly the first 2. There was already a lot of stuff out there, behind the scenes stuff, and the crew like posting stuff. I mean, Jesus Christ, they like that. They'll post on the same day they've shot something, going to be like 100 images, and we're like, we've got to get something which hasn't been seen before. We've got to get some really kind of like cool stuff. And the great thing about the 3rd film, because it was a little bit more secretive and tighter, we got loads of stuff off Tinsley Studios, and we got stuff obviously, the costume lady and some of the producers, which they hadn't posted, and then they weren't the type of people to post stuff either. They weren't. So I think that was the worry at one stage. We were just going to be regurgitating the same things that was already out there. But actually, we got a lot of gold in the end. Again, that's testament to John for pushing and fighting and arguing and nagging constantly. And the issue we had particularly was that we were nagging these guys whilst they were in post-production. So we were in post-production on a documentary, they're in post-production on the movie. So that was really kind of like stressful because like we would get, they were away in Mexico in a editing suite, and we're nagging them for archive. But the beauty is we got to see the film about 2 months before everybody else. So that was quite cool. So everyone's like doing these kind of things online going, I wonder, does this happen? And we go, we know. So it was quite interesting.
Well, I mean, you guys are, I would think also that there's just 2 different things of it here. You guys with RoboDoc, for an example, and Pennywise and Leviathan, those are all your advertising or promoting and marketing those to the people who are fans of those films that are like historical film, like you're like diehard fans. Like, hey, I used to watch this when I was a kid, or so on and so forth. This is like striking when the iron's hot. Like, okay, Terrifier 3 is in front of people's heads. It's right there, and now you're just trying to get produce and release this documentary on the heels of the actual release of the movie. So you're trying to get the flame that's already going and trying to see if you can keep it going with this thing.
Yeah.
That's why we wanted to do it. And I think we really kind of, even though there was times where we were going to stop because obviously just the complications regards to scheduling, I think we kept saying over and over again, me and John did, this is an IP which is fresh and new. It's already established itself in 6, 7, 8 years as a horror icon already. We've covered Pinhead, we've covered Jerry Dandridge, we've covered RoboCop, we've covered Pennywise. Let's look at something which is fresh as well. And the interesting thing was, we weren't. There's no disrespect because we're old. No, but we had young people to interview. It wasn't old men and old women. It was like an archive of dead people. It was literally like teenagers and 20-year-olds and 25-year-olds. So that was really kind of strange as well for us. That like, hang on a minute, there's no wrinkles other than us. We're the oldest people sometimes. Yeah.
Let's reach out to this so-and-so person from this movie. Are they still alive? Now that you don't have to worry about that, you're like, no, they're right there.
But that was it, And it's like sometimes you don't realize that they're dead. Some people, even like when you interview people, we've had it a couple of times. We've interviewed somebody, and they're going, "Oh yeah, Brian's a great guy. I love Brian. Can't wait to see him again." You're going, he died 5 years ago. I'm like, what? And then they start crying in front of you because you didn't know. It's like, well, you're not much friend, really. You didn't know.
You're the one telling them.
I'm off topic. I know quite a well-known actor in the UK, and I was talking to him the other day, and he was friends. Actually, I didn't know this, John, but he was friends with Tim Curry back in like the 60s and 70s.
Oh wow!
In the theaters, and I was telling him, about what happened with the stroke, and he went, "When did he have the stroke?" And I went, "What?" He went, "Was he okay?" I said, "That was like 2012," and he went, "I didn't even know." I was like, "It's some great mate you are." Don't you read the tabloids? But I think that's the actor's bubble. I think, to be honest, they're so focused on their kind of roles and whatnot. They don't do what we do. They're not playing. There's a dog. He agrees.
He's trying to tell you about Tim Curry's stroke. It's
Yeah, I mean, I think by like what Gary was saying, by comparison, the hunt to find people. I mean, we didn't have to hunt to find people. No. I would call Mike Levy from Fuzz on the Lens and say, "Can I get so and so's email?" And we'd email them. So working on a film that's current, it definitely has its advantages. So
and so I mean, you guys. So obviously, they approached you. You're making this movie or this film. You're doing this documentary. I mean, were you fans? Like, is this one of those things where it was an easy yes because of the fact that you're fans of the Terrifier franchise to start off with, or is this something that you just did because it seemed like an interesting thing to do?
Yeah, I was. I mean, I like the image of Art the Clown. I think it's a simple image, but I think it's a great iconic image already. So I was very much aware of it. I'd watched 1 and 2. I'd watched obviously All Hallows Eve and obviously the other Terrifier, the short. So I was very much aware of who he was, and obviously I think I had the mask as well upstairs. I mean, that's a different one there, but I had the mask obviously from Trick or Treat Studios. So I very much knew who he was. I think that was exciting as well to get someone. And what I really liked is to get someone like David when he's at the start of that journey as well. We just done a documentary with Robert Englund, and he's like nearly 40 years into that journey of Freddy. And he's already he's gone through the stages of Freddy where he's gone through, the initial excitement, then the regret, and then the embarrassment to a degree of playing Freddy, and then he's now the acceptance of Freddy. And I think that's a really interesting journey. And I know most actors go through that over their career, but maybe it would be different for someone like David because straight away, David is getting the accolades and recognition for Art the Clown as being an icon, whereas Robert didn't have that straight away. He had obviously Freddie was huge, but Robert wasn't huge. And there wasn't conventions really, as in the 80s, and there was the odd thing in Fangoria. So I think maybe his journey is going to be slightly different, but I'd like to see how that journey develops. I think with David, particularly about how he handles that, because you've got some people like Kane Hodder, Doug Bradley, Robert, Jeffrey Combs, who have created his career by being an icon. But it's taken a long time. He's already an icon, which is really weird. He's already there, and I think we'll start seeing these posters with Freddy Krueger on and Pinhead, and we'll see Art the Clown already on it. And I think that's kind of a strange thing where you couldn't put an Art the Clown next to Leatherface, and that franchise is 50 years old, and so that's the interesting thing for me. And I think, and I'm a fan of that. I'm a fan of like the psychology behind it as well, about how that's going to develop. I think as well.
I wasn't really, to be honest, I wasn't super familiar with them. I mean, I had seen the first one, and I think I had seen All Hallows Eve, but it wasn't particularly on my radar. But I got familiar pretty quickly. And the thing I would say to Gary a lot was that aside from the character in the movies, what I was really attracted to was this idea of like an indie film being as successful as it is in an era where we're up against, multi-million dollar Hollywood films. I mean, the fact that like a little indie horror film could gain such traction and organically, I thought was really one of the hearts of the story, of talking about all the movies. And so I was excited to sort of tap into that a little bit too, because I mean, that's pretty profound. And whether you're a big fan of the films or not, you can't take that away from
No. And you can see the third film the third film was a little bit different than the first two in budget wise and so on and so forth, but makes more movie than a movie that's based around Joker, an iconic DC character for years and years and years and years.
Or Snow White. Look at Snow White.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's that you can't take it.
And I think in this day and age, what's strange, that film was balls against the wall. He doesn't care about, I'm not going to go into like the debate about woke and stuff like that, but he doesn't care about it. He doesn't give a chuff about what people think of it, really. And I think that's what I quite like about Damien. He's a fan, and he's obviously, of course, he's been in the industry for a long time, but he loves gore, he loves horror. He doesn't care about showing some boob and some willy and having a balls chop off. He doesn't care about that because he knows there's a market for it, and he knows that people think it's funny and gore. I went to go and see Terrifier in the cinema 1 and 2. It was re-released in the UK just before the third film came out, and I was really surprised that no word of a lie, people got up and walked out. I'm thinking, surely you know who Art the Clown is by now. You know what I mean? Surely you've not gone to the cinema and go, you know what? It's a date night. Let's go and see this film. Well, this interesting. It's a double bill for a start for like 4 hours. Let's go and watch a film about a clown. People getting up and walking out. I was like, that's actually really important. That's really good, because if I made a film, people walked out because it was gory, ticking that box. Walking out because the story's crap, that's different.
Yes, exactly. Well, that was the whole marketing, the whole thing about someone like, someone passing out or someone throwing up. I'm like, I'm sure Damien's like, we did our job.
That's what you want. I mean, that's the kind of that's it's the old adage of there's no publicity is bad publicity. Whether it's John Waters films or The Exorcist, where people let them walk out, let them vomit, like that's
let them protest outside. Who cares? It's just about marketing. It's the whole thing.
Yeah, get the Catholic Church mad at you. Get the Catholic, go for it. Let's do it. It's
But I think, as John said, I think it's such an interesting thing they've done. I mean, all credit to them, to create something which the formula is not new. We know that the first film, it's not a new formula. I know Damien's tried to change it a little bit with a more supernatural element. Yeah, but the design of him isn't much different to a lot of features and whatnot of other characters. But there's something about that character instantly about it, and it's again, I think it's a lot to do with David. You've got to give him the credit, regards to the portrayal of Art. I think somebody else trying to do it would be interesting. I know, obviously, Mike did it in the original, but there's a massive difference between them two characters. It's like Brian Cox versus Anthony Hopkins, isn't it, with Hannibal? It's a massive difference. I actually prefer Brian, but anyway, I think that cultural kind of change, as impact that they've had, as John said, I think it's so weird. It's so interesting that in this day and age, a really low budget, gory horror film with tits and ass and willy and bum and all that, and vomit and and all that stuff and shit basically on walls can literally make more money than the Joker, as John said. It just shows that there's an audience for those films. And that people want to see that. And what I hope doesn't happen is we get a load of crap come out now from other people. And I know I've seen a few, I won't name people because I give everybody credit. Me and John have all said it. Me and John have. We never ever publicly diss any film at all. We never do that, because we know we've made our own stuff. John's made his Georgie short. I've made my Dark Ditty series. We know the pain and suffering goes into any production. So everybody that does something, you give them credit for, even if it's the biggest piece of shit you've ever seen. Someone's been on set, someone's written that, someone's made some effort, someone's put some money into it. Praise them for the effort. But don't slag them off publicly. Keep that to yourself in your little forums.
Once we turn off the recording, we can say it.
Wait till you see mine and John's private messages. He's always slagging people off, John is. But so I think that for me, I think it's just so important that, as John said, the cultural impact of this one film is outstanding. It just is. And I hope it does make Damien a lot of money. I hope he doesn't lose his independence regards to his flair. Well, I hope he goes on to do something really, interesting in regards to another franchise, another IP, and maybe it does kind of like push for a new Freddy Krueger film or a new Jason film, which is gory and balls to the wall. Maybe that's what we'll get next because of this. Maybe.
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's one of those things that Damien's made a name for himself, and that's another thing that's really cool in my opinion is that how often, I mean, as a director or a special effects person, have that much name. I mean, I have this Terrifier shirt right here from Terror Threads. I have a Damien Leone shirt in my closet.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And so, and the fact that his name is synonymous with Terrifier is a very unheard of. Carpenter's Halloween. Like it's like, how is that the same? How is that? It's insane.
I think it's the strangest thing, and it's brilliant. Yeah. The brilliant thing is that a film which is only the first one's 2016. Is it the first one? Is it something like that? Isn't it the first film?
Yeah,
something like that where you not just get a convention with just David. What's the common? My head's gone blank with names now. And Dame, you've got Phil Falcone there, you've got Michael Levy there, you've got Jason Levy there, you've got. It's like that's unusual. You don't ever get the producers and the cameraman and the DP and the tea lady. You don't get that. But for this franchise, people have just accepted these people as like celebrities, which is amazing for the horror industry. Yeah. And it's not just Damien. I think you're right. Damien having a t-shirt is ridiculous in a positive way. It's fucking, you never got a Wes Craven t-shirt in 1984, but I think for Damien, it's amazing. But Phil Falcone sitting there signing autographs. Like, when would you have got Chris Figg from Hellraiser signing autographs in 1987? It would never have happened. Rob Shea doing it would never have happened. Nope. Now you've got it. It's like, hang on a minute. Me and John have always been behind the camera, hiding, and literally the ones that are making shit. I'm getting out there now, signing shit. We're documentary things. We tell people who we are for our documentary. They want to lynch us and kill us. So that's a different story. We're signing checks of an autographs. But I think that's an amazing element of the cultural impact. That if you worked on that film, doesn't matter what your role are, you are going to be at a convention signing autographs, and it just shows the impact that's had that people want. The shop on number 10 in the mall scene, the third, and they got a queue around the corner. It's like, what the brilliant.
It's brilliant. Well, it's amazing, and that's probably. I mean, I'm guessing. I'm gonna speak for you guys, but again, that's one of the reasons why I drew you to do this. Like, obviously, there's passions in I just watched the Pet Sematary documentary, and I actually watched Snapper. That's Sean.
I love that. Yeah, it's great.
But yeah, so you had sent it to me a while back, and I was like, oh crap, I never got a chance to watch that. So I had to find the email with the Vimeo link in it and stuff like that. But yeah, and so. But you have passions to go into this because it's something that you want to do, and it's just what draws you likely to this type of film and making a documentary about a film like Terrifier is their passion. I think it shows, and there's so much watching this film and watching what you guys were able to accomplish with this documentary. Just it reinvigorated me to go. I want to go back and watch number one again. Like I want to see all this stuff. Yeah,
that's exactly what we try and do. We want people to go and revisit Pet Sematary, to go and revisit Fright Night, to go and revisit Fright Night Part 2, because the whole point is we're trying to give you a flavour of that. And what we've always said as well from day one, we never do anything negative. We've sat in interviews where we've had negative stories and quite fruity stories about people. We've never did it. We never sat to do that or criticise people. When we looked at the spider, for argument's sake, in Pennywise, we didn't rip it to pieces. We gave the people a chance to talk about it. We did the same on Return of the Living Dead with Bill Munns, who was sacked as the original makeup artist on Tarman, and actually did a really good on Tarman, on the Yellow Cadaver and things like that. We gave him his chance to finally speak and give his reasons. And I think that's what, and again, I don't mean negative about obviously what our experience is on projects, but that's what me and John, I think we've always kind of joined together on, is that when we do get criticised for various things, I think we come from this as fans. We're not here to make millions. I still work in education, have done for 25 years, even though we've done 8 documentaries and a TV series and whatnot. And John's done shitloads of stuff. We still work in our industries because we're doing it for the passion of filmmaking. And the passion, as you said, of celebrating these films that we love. I want a documentary on Fright Night. I want to go and see a documentary on Fright Night. No one made it, so I want to watch that. So let's just do it ourselves. Nobody had ever celebrated Robert Englund. How is that even possible? Yeah, exactly. How would nobody gone? Robert is this Freddy Krueger. He's a Shakespearean trained theatre actor. Maybe there's more to him than just that glove and fedora. Maybe it's a little bit more. Nobody had ever, when we approached him, he said no one's ever approached him. How is that possible? How? An icon. You got literally Bela Lugosi sitting there, Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, Vincent Price, our version of that person sitting there, and no one's talking to them. So that's really, that's why it's passionate for us. We want to get obviously stories out there which aren't told very often, and celebrate people whilst they're still here as well. Because I guarantee if when Robert passes, like we all will, there'll be loads of Hollywood stories about him. There'll be loads of little mini things. Well, why don't do it when he's here so he can appreciate it and he can see the fandom? So hopefully we've done that with Hollywood Dreams. I'm hoping. And now, obviously, with Terrifier, as I said,
you've done the same thing.
We haven't waited 30 years, and just kept sat in the archive. We've literally done it now.
We've got like fresh stories too. People like fresh things that are actually talking about that just happened. They're not trying to recall these things or look at photos and go, "Oh yeah, that's happened." I mean, there's things that happened to me in my life. Someone asked me about it. I'm like, I don't remember that shit.
I know. I've been joking with a guy called Jeff Portas. He's the guy who created the original. He actually did the design and makeup of Pinhead.
Okay.
In the original Hellraiser. And my friend Ken Cranham, who played Chenard in number 2, he goes to all his conventions, Ken does, and tells his same story about having straw stuck up his nose. And Jeff is like adamant that never happened. But Ken is convinced it happened. And you've got Jeff going, there's no way I would ever do that. As a professional person, I would never have done that. But that's where Ken's got it from. I have no idea. And all the other crews,
he told it once, and they just kept on going. Like, okay, I guess it must have happened.
all the other crew say never happened. Yet Kenny's convinced it's happened. So it's like, but you're right. Stories do get lost a little bit, and I know I've seen people on Q&As telling really interesting, quirky stories, which they weren't on set that day.
Yeah,
but it's somebody else's story they've heard. Yeah. And they've made it their own, and it's exaggerated somewhere. And I think you're right, exactly there. We've just got fresh stories now, which happen on the day. Literally, I think when we shot the interviews for Terrifier 3, it was a week after they just finished filming. They are fresh as they can be. I think Damien was just going into the edit, I think, a couple of days before. So I think that's quite cool from our point of view. I think that, as you said, it's like we're literally getting the stories now.
Yeah.
So that's brilliant.
And you mentioned the photos, like you talk about the photos that are current and now and stuff like that. These are also, you mentioned the story being told at conventions over and over and over again. The same thing happens here. Is like you guys got stories that probably have been told at some conventions and in panels and things like that in recent years, because obviously they're at conventions right now. But like it isn't 40 years later of the same story being told over and over and over again. And you're doing a documentary.
Like I said before, I'm used to digging in basements and having to digitize 35 millimeter slides. And with this one, it was like, here's a Dropbox link or
exactly.
a Google Drive link. You've got all these photos on your phone. Just send them up, so
drag it into the timeline. Cool. We're done. Sounds good.
yeah. I mean, sort of. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it's that easy, but I'm just saying like, there's that option.
Right.
Like it makes it a little bit easier in that sense. But that's really cool. I mean, is this from this experience of doing this Terrifier 3 documentary, and it's called Terrifier 3 documentary, but I will say to people who haven't watched it or whatever, there's a lot of the entire franchise in this too. It focuses mostly on the 3, and you guys were on set and things like that for 3. But you do show some behind the scene footage and some other stuff from 1 and 2 and things like that. And there's obviously relations and they talk in the documentary about how things have grown and changed and things like that over the years, and how Damien is now focused less on special effects because he was able to hire people and so on and so forth. So all of that's in it too. But yeah, does this make you want to do stories like this again, like another basically on set kind of thing, or do you find more passion and do you think it's more fun to do a story on that hasn't been told 40 years after the making of the movie?
I'm just going to turn my light on, okay? Because I'm literally so dark now. John, you answer that question.
You're just a shadow now. Yeah. I think there's room for both. I mean, it's a different process. The Terrifier one was a different process for kind of all the reasons we talked about. And challenging in a different way. I mean, navigating an active production, there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different people. So it's a different challenge that you don't encounter when you're doing a doc on an older IP or something like that, or a lost film or whatever. So I think there's room for both. I think both are exciting and both allow you to sort of exercise different kinds of muscles and have their own unique challenges and their own payoffs in different ways. So I would I would welcome another opportunity to do something like that for sure.
Well, speaking of that, you said it's room for both. How about 30 years from now, you guys do another documentary on on this movie and just like update your old documentary with the stories that have happened
Yes,
over the years?
I'll be 73 then,
Hey,
so I don't think
you're gonna be Gary. You'll be still making films. Don't even. Don't even.
Yeah.
Like, you'll still be on set trying to make films here. Come on. No, like I said, there are differences, but maybe you're right. There is a space for both of it. I think that there's. Like I said, there's fun. You mentioned climbing in crawl spaces and looking through boxes and things like that. You're archivalist. You would found joy in that too, though, right, John? I
Oh
mean, like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
it's definitely something that you like to do. It's not all work or it's
Oh, I
work,
love
really.
doing that. Are you kidding?
Yeah,
No, I mean it's hard work, but I love it. I mean,
yeah,
yeah, Gary saw it all the time. I mean, I would always call him or message him when we were doing Pennywise, be like, look at these photos. Like, that's the thrill of the hunt for
hmm
me.
hmm
So as long as I can keep doing that,
I think the problem we have now is that the franchises are disappearing now.
Yes.
What's out there, really? Halloween's been done, Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, obviously RoboCop now, and when the list goes on and on,
Yep.
I think so. There's a lot which has been done, and you don't want to repeat yourself on things as well. The frustrating thing is John will vouch for as well is when you do a documentary, you spend 3-4 years making it, and then you release it. Somebody finds a box of bloody photographs in the garage.
Yeah.
That happens to us all the time. That does all the time. Someone who promised the world and then couldn't find it, and suddenly finds it and posts it on Instagram. Then, but that's their prerogative to do that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, I think it's interesting for us. I think this new model we have about doing new stuff, because I think that helps us regards to the our kind of own kind of like portfolio. I think going back to an old one's going to be, I think will be harder. I think for us now, I think because one, we would never go back to Kickstarter again or Indiegogo. We've learned our lesson there, and I think it's what's left now to do, which is going to be appealing for a streaming service to funds. And my friend and John's friend Mikey has just done the Child's Play documentary, and again that's taken him 4 years, I think, to do that. It's a long. It's when you do something which is about an old franchise, it's a long process because it is hard to find people and track people down and track archive down. The beauty of something new is it's there, it's fresh, as you said before. So I think I'm really torn. I am, regards to what we can do in the future. In turn, I think our future probably is more new stuff, and obviously replicating what we've done on Terrifier with new IPs which is coming out, and working with ScreamBox. I think we've had a great experience with ScreamBox now. We've done obviously RoboDoc, Pennywise, Hollow Dreams, Terrifier, John's licensed a couple of his things. I've licensed Leviathan and Brewster's to them, so we've got a good portfolio of them, a nice little kind of like already library with ScreamBox for both our projects, and I hope that continues in that sense.
It's an approachable service too, I think, to people where the price is not insanely expensive to subscribe to, and if you like have Amazon or whatever, you can just add it onto your Amazon. Like it's approachable to get to, into that school too.
I hope they do something more international, because I don't have shutters everywhere, but obviously ScreamBox isn't yet. So I'm hoping that we get it obviously over here. I think it's screaming for it, because I think again I don't disrespectful to other streaming services, but one I just mentioned, it's not very well, it's not updated very often, and it's like and if you're a horror fan, you've got most of that stuff anyway. So fresh content's really important. And what I like about ScreamBox, they're always trying to do fresh and new. They're constantly trying to invest in new films. Obviously, they've mentioned recently about Wolf Creek, their involvement in that, and in Silent Night. That's unusual for a streaming service to be investing, other than someone like Netflix and Amazon. I think that's really cool there. And again, that gives us opportunity to us to work on stuff, hopefully. But you don't really get that with Shudder. You don't get that. You get, they've done a few things which are fresh, but not in. I think ScreamBox is very much keen on doing fresh content and new narrative, which is really cool for us.
Yeah. And it was cool because I could go on there and watch Terrifier 3 and then watch this documentary right after if I wanted to, where you're in the same spot. It makes it really easy in that sense too. But so this was a fun experience. I'm guessing it was something new. It was quick, like you mentioned. It was within a year. You guys got accepted the job, did the job, and is now out for people to see. You said you've seen reactions to this online. You've seen the behind the scenes the people that are terrified. I'm guessing you had fun with this job and it was success in your guys' eyes.
Any project's is fun for a little bit, I think you have about 10% fun and the rest is stress.
Okay.
And this was no different, really, it wasn't, because the experience was different for us and for ScreamBox, if I'm being honest. I think the whole kind of way that we delivered and managed and worked with ScreamBox was completely different. And the scheduling was obviously tight, really tight. And I think because as producers, John and I, and obviously Adam and Chris are involved as well, but that's the stress. We know we've got two other producers. We've got a sales producer who works very closely with me, Lawrence, who's brilliant. And we've got Hank, who's a post-production producer. They're on us like 24/7, have you done this? Have you done that? Deliverables here, we need this. So it's really strange. Any project strange. The difference with this one, I think, and again, I don't know what John thinks about it, is that we didn't spend long enough on it to hate it. Because I think what happens on projects, you get to a stage where you don't want to hear about Pennywise anymore. And then when it's released, you find the love again for what you do. You go, you know what? Actually, I remember that. I remember when we shot that interview. Oh, that person's hilarious. But right up to the end, you don't want to know about it because you're so stressed about it. You're so panicky about it. We didn't have enough time, I don't think, on this one to get to that stage, really. And I think I've said to you off air earlier on, the weird thing was it just came out, which was unusual for us because we were part of the build-up. I think on Pennywise, maybe more. It was more on Hollywood Dreams and on RoboDoc. We did 30 podcasts, I think, as part of a marketing campaign on that. So strange. This just came out. It was in Variety. It was in Fangoria. It was got a nice sort of buzz. But I think because it was coming out on the tail end of the film, they didn't need to promote it at all. There was no need to promote it. Like usually, everyone is obsessed with Terrifier. So that was a strange experience for us because we weren't as involved in the PR and release of it. Whereas I said, me and John were sitting in interviews and Chris like non-stop for the other projects. So that's been a very different experience as well. And now it's out and it's like it's there and it's like I know it's going to get another life in another way. I can't go into too much detail about, but. It's very, very kind of like weird for us. It's just, someone told me they'd watched it. I think they'd watched it dodgily, but and it was like, it's just, oh, okay, that's brilliant. I know they'll go on Letterbox and it's there. And people talking very positive about it. And the difference is as well, whereas because we're doing a lot of marketing on RoboDoc and Hollywood Dreams and Pennywise, the reviews are coming in from Fangoria, Sci-Fi Magazine, Starburst. We haven't had that because they don't need to push it at all because it's there. So that's a weird experience because to try and find a review on it, which isn't a fan review, is really hard. Actually, it is. It's not. People aren't you on Facebook and type it in or Twitter or X, whatever it's called now, whatever Musk is calling it. It's you find lots of nice comments, but there's nothing in the mainstream media about it. Again, just weird. It's weird, but again,
it's weird feeling.
We work for hire on it. So, and hopefully, like you said, you enjoyed it. People,
and I'm guessing that what they're banking on is people watching 3 and then having being like related videos and have it be like the next thing that you watch, being like, oh, add this to my wish list or watch list or whatever. And so
we had a 10-minute preview as well, didn't we, on the cinema, which was interesting. We never experienced that before. And I think it was very much like again from Cineverses, and that was stressful because we had to get that ready in about 4 days, I think it was, and a trailer, and that's like you don't think about, but you forget about the trailer. You do always work on the actual main production. And someone says, by the way, one of the deliverables is a 2-minute trailer. You're like, okay, oops, let's go back, and that's more money for us because obviously we've got them pay for like the sounding on that, the mix on that, the grading on that. It's complete, it's like that's the business element, which none of us like, is where we have to sign invoices for like stuff that we did ourselves on Leviathan and on Pet Sematary and on Brewster, but because it's going mainstream streaming, it has to meet QCs, which we can't do at home.
But I mean, it was a fun thing, and I was glad I heard about it because I'm always about, like you mentioned, I like those extra things on the DVDs. I like those extra stuff. And then obviously, like I said, I connected with John a couple of years ago and watched Pennywise and been a fan of the work that you've been doing. And so actually the Pet Sematary one was actually kind of funny. I live like a mile from the Pet Sematary, like literally.
Oh, really?
I live in Orrington. So it's like...
Oh, you're in Orrington?
Wow, yeah. Okay. My daughter is 1 and she has sometimes trouble sleeping, kicking her nap, whatever. I'll throw her in the back of the car and we'll go for a drive. And 9 out of 10 times I just drive by it. I go, oh, there it is.
So you're saying a minute, your daughter's struggling to sleep, so you take her to the Pet Sematary?
Yeah. Wait.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Well, I listen to audiobooks too, so like half the audiobooks that she listens to in the backseat
Oh,
are like
shit, really?
probably not
Oh,
like
good.
she's gonna be like, I like Stephen King, weird.
Start them young. That's the best. I
Yeah,
was started very young. You know,
Yeah, same here.
I was watching horror films at 3, 4 years
yeah,
old and
yeah.
taking them into school by borrowing Freddy Krueger to my friends. You got to start them young, and then they don't get scared. Then.
Yeah, my son goes to school and tells his teacher, "Yeah, my dad was listening to Stephen King on the way in. Was probably listening to a Stephen King audiobook on the way in to drop him off at school." But no, so seeing that like the Pet Cemetery one and seeing it, you having footage of like I could have driven by when you recorded it, but I mean so on and so forth. And I'm not obviously far from the actual house that in the movie, which is pretty fun. But yeah, so yeah, these documentaries are awesome. I reached out to say if you guys wanted to get on here. I was like I really wanted to hear your perspective and your thoughts on this stuff and stuff like that. And so I'm really glad we found time to do it because it's a fun. I think documentaries are a lot of fun, and I think based on the horror genre or the pop culture genre in general is awesome. So I'm glad you guys made this film, and I'm glad you guys are making all the films that you're making because they're fun to do. And it's funny. I don't know why. I'm going to put this in the hand of my local comic book shop owner. He's a massive RoboCop fan, and I've sent him the link to watch it 1,000 times, being like, watch this documentary, and he still hasn't yet. So now I'm going to go to his house, I'm going to put it in his hand, and I'm saying, I'm going to give this to you. Please watch it. And, it's some people are documentary fans, some people aren't, and I hope that he falls in love with it because of the fact that he's a big RoboCop fan, but... Hey, to each his own.
Yeah, well, we've got hopefully soon, part 2 and 3 coming out as well, so that'd be interesting.
Fun to see that too. Yeah. But so I really appreciate you finding the time to do this and discuss the film. Is that the art attack? The Dissection of Terrifier 3 is available on ScreamBox right now. So if anybody wants to watch that, go and watch it. It's a lot of fun. And watch the films. I mean, be prepared for some gore and some blood and some guts and some pretty gruesome scenes. But, it's worth I think it's worth it. I think it's, again, like we mentioned, it's one of those things that 10, 15, 20 years from now, it's going to be talked about like Halloween and Jason and all these other films, Friday the 13th. Those films, it's going to be put in that. It's going to be a horror icon. Art the Clown, that without his mask on, I keep thinking he works at like Enterprise Renter Car. Like David Howard Thornton looks like he works like a manager at a rental car place.
Yeah, he does.
Or he's like some sort of high school English teacher or something like that. Yeah. He doesn't look like he dresses up in clown paint and murders people. It's definitely not on his thing. Also, I think it's funny when you guys made this film, it was like after making Pennywise, you're like, yeah, we'll just talk about another killer clown. That's cool. Let's just keep the clear.
But the weird thing was, again, I hadn't connected it, but that, when we interviewed Damien talks about how art was inspired by Pennywise. It was meant to be the reverse of Pennywise, quiet, instead of being talky and jokey, and obviously black and white as opposed to colourful colours. Again, we're like, we watch that and go, wow, that for us, it's an impact straight away. Obviously, that there's a link there as well between those characters. Yeah. And it's I never ever thought about it, and actually makes so much sense that he's the opposite to Pennywise, the complete opposite. So he's like literally chalk and cheese. Mm-hmm. And there wouldn't be an art clown about Pennywise, Yeah, but there wouldn't be. That's very well established in the doc. So that's cool. I think for us, that's something we've already celebrated, particularly Tim, and then to have this interpretation of a clown, which is very much inspired by Tim and the killer clown, I think is great. And again, who would have known 10 years ago that a killer clown would be so popular, and who would have known that Stephen King, Tim Curry's It would be so popular now? John being a hardcore fan and me being a fan as a kid, I would have dreamt, of having a Pennywise Tim Curry action figure, T-shirts, masks, costumes, plush dolls. Sure. It's just such amazing that character is actually. We did a doc. He wasn't that big with the doc, was he? Really, John?
The new one hadn't just come out yet, so it didn't have a resurgence yet.
So it's been weird for us since making Pennywise that how popular the original Tim Curry version has become. I think that's great because it's found its world now because of obviously the new movie. And it was interesting at the time. So when we did the doc, it wasn't people knew him because obviously who were kids watching it. But now to get an action figure of it and a bobblehead and a fucking any figure you can think of, 12 inch, 10 inches, 6 inches, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's so cool, and I love it. Like I said, I love the stories that I learn, and I think that, and one of the things I'll tell a lot of people out there is these documentaries too. I think a lot of people in their head like watch it once, learn the stuff, move on, kind of thing. It's like educational. No, it's always fun to go back because even in a documentary, I miss things. I don't know if I was getting a cup of coffee or doing something else, going to the bathroom, whatever, and I miss a story or didn't fully grasp what they were saying, or watch the documentary, watch the movie again, watch the documentary again, that kind of thing. So there's definitely the buying it on the steel book is not an insane thing to do because of the fact that A, physical media is still number one, and B, you can go back and watch it over and over again and not have to worry about finding where to stream it and things like that because it's a fun thing. But I do appreciate you taking the time to discuss the film and so much more and the legacy of Terrifier and Damien Leone and so on and so forth. We'll have you come back on at some point in the future to discuss other documentaries and things like that if you want. But until then, I appreciate it.
No, thank you. Thanks for having us. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.